The rainy day that changed my life began like an ordinary Friday. I had spent the morning visiting clients in different parts of the city, and by late afternoon, I was tired and ready to go home. The sky had been gray all day, but I had ignored it because the weather report only mentioned light rain. I did not bring an umbrella. At around 5 o'clock, I left my final meeting and started walking toward the train station. The station was only 15 minutes away, so I believed I could reach it before the rain became serious. I was halfway there when the first drops began to fall. At first, the rain was gentle. I continued walking and pulled my jacket closer around me. Within a few minutes, however, the light rain became heavy rain. Water fell so quickly that the street seemed to disappear behind a gray wall. People ran toward buildings, bus stops, and covered entrances. Cars slowed down, and water began collecting near the sides of the road. I tried to continue, but my clothes were becoming wet, and I could barely see ahead. I decided to find a place where I could wait for the rain. The nearest open building was a small shop between a bakery and an old apartment building. I had passed it many times, but had never gone inside. Its faded sign showed that it sold used books, postcards, and small gifts. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. A small bell rang above me. The shop was warm and quiet, and the smell of old paper filled the air. Shelves covered every wall, and narrow paths ran between tables full of books. Only one employee was working behind the counter. I apologized for entering with wet shoes and explained that I only needed to wait for the rain. The employee did not seem bothered. He showed me a small mat near the entrance and returned to arranging books. I stood near the window and watched the heavy rain hit the glass. I thought it would slow down after a few minutes, but it only became stronger. My train was not leaving soon, so I decided to look around. Most of the books were old. Some had damaged covers, and others had notes written inside them. There were travel guides from 20 years earlier, children's stories, cookbooks, and boxes of photographs that seemed to belong to strangers. Near the back of the shop, I found a shelf of old music books. I picked one up and began turning the pages. That was when I heard the bell above the entrance ring again. Another person had entered to wait for the rain. I did not pay much attention at first. I was reading a handwritten note inside the music book when I heard footsteps behind me. The person walks slowly through the shop and stops near a box of postcards. There was something familiar about the way he moved. I looked up. The man appeared to be around my age. He was wearing a wet black coat, and his dark hair had begun to turn gray near the sides. I could not see his face clearly because he was looking down. For a few seconds, I felt that I should recognize him, but I could not understand why. Then he turned toward the window. I recognized him immediately. His name was Daniel, and he had once been my closest friend. We had met at university almost 15 years earlier. We lived in the same student building, studied many of the same subjects, and spent most of our free time together. People often believed we were brothers because we were rarely seen apart. Daniel had helped me through some of the most difficult years of my life. When my father became ill during my second year of university, Daniel covered my classes, shared his notes, and traveled with me to the hospital several times. When I had little money, he shared meals with me without making me feel ashamed. We had once believed that we would remain friends forever. But after graduation, life moved quickly. Daniel accepted a job in another city. I stayed behind and began working for a financial company. At first, we called each other every week. Then the calls became monthly. Later, we only sent short messages on birthdays and holidays. Eventually, we lost touch. There was no argument and no single moment when the friendship ended. We simply became busy. Daniel changed his phone number, I moved twice, and our messages became less frequent until they stopped completely. I had not seen him in more than 10 years. Now he was standing only a few meters away from me in a small bookshop while heavy rain covered the city outside. I wanted to approach him, but I suddenly felt uncertain 10 years was a long time. He might not recognize me. He might have forgotten the past or decided that our friendship no longer mattered. I also wondered whether he would feel hurt that I had never tried harder to find him. I watched him pick up a postcard and study the picture on the front. The postcard showed the old university library. That made me remember the past even more clearly. Daniel and I had spent many nights studying in that library. We often stayed until closing time, then walked home through empty streets. During exams, we lived on coffee and cheap sandwiches. We talked about our future jobs, the places we wanted to visit, and the kind of people we hoped to become. Back then, we had shared almost everything. The man in front of me looked older, but small details were the same. He still held books carefully with both hands. He still moved his lips slightly while reading. He still carried an old leather bag over one shoulder. I took a step forward. Before I could reach him, he turned and looked directly at me. His expression changed. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled in the same familiar way I remembered from university. We both understood that we recognized each other. The first moments felt strange. There was so much to say, but neither of us knew where to begin. After such a long time with no contact, even a simple greeting carried years of memories. We began with the obvious fact that it had been a long time since we had seen each other. We both expressed surprise that we had met again in such an unexpected place. Daniel explained that he had recently moved back to the city. His company had opened a new office, and he had accepted a position there 3 months earlier. He lived less than 20 minutes from the bookshop. I could hardly believe it. For years, I had imagined him living far away. He had returned to the same city, and we might never have met if the heavy rain had not forced both of us into that shop. We moved toward a small seating area near the back. The employee brought 2 chairs closer together, and we sat while the rain continued outside. We began to remember the past. At first, the memories were small and funny. We recalled the terrible food in our student building, the time we got lost during a university trip, and the old car Daniel had bought for almost no money. The car broke down so often that we carried tools everywhere. Then we remembered more serious moments. Daniel told me that he had never forgotten the day my father returned home from the hospital. He remembered how relieved I had been and how we had celebrated with a cheap cake. I remembered helping him prepare for his first important interview. He had been so nervous that he changed his shirt 3 times and almost missed the bus. Talking about those years made them feel close again. Still, there was one subject we both avoided at first. Neither of us mentioned why we had lost touch. Eventually, I decided that I needed to be honest. I explained that, after several unanswered messages, I had assumed Daniel no longer wanted the friendship. I had felt hurt, but I had also been too proud to call again. Daniel looked surprised. He explained that he had lost his phone during a move and had also lost many contact numbers. He tried to find me online, but I had stopped using my old account. Later, when he saw that one of my messages had gone unanswered, he assumed that I was angry with him. We had both made the same mistake. Each of us had waited for the other person to make the next move. As months became years, contacting each other felt more difficult. We worried that too much time had passed. There had been no real reason to lose touch. We had only allowed silence and wrong assumptions to grow between us. That realization made me feel sad. We had missed important parts of each other's lives because neither of us had been willing to try one more time. Daniel had married and later become the father of a daughter. I had never known. His marriage had ended several years earlier, and he now shared care of his daughter with his former wife. I told him that my mother had died 5 years earlier. He looked deeply sorry because he had known her well during our university years. I also told him about my work, my younger brother's family, and the apartment I had bought. There were many years to cover. The rain continued for almost 2 hours. Normally, I would have been frustrated by such a long delay. That day, I wanted the rain to continue. Every extra minute gave us more time to rebuild a connection I had believed was gone forever. When the rain finally became lighter, the shop was preparing to close. Daniel and I bought the university postcard and the old music book. We exchanged current phone numbers and checked them carefully. We did not simply promise to contact each other someday. We made a clear plan to meet again the following weekend. Then we walked toward the train station together. The streets were wet and shining under the lights. Water still fell from the trees, and people stepped carefully around deep pools near the sidewalk. Daniel and I walked slowly because neither of us wanted the evening to end too quickly. Over the next few weeks, we met several times. At first, we continued talking about the past. Then, our conversations slowly moved toward the present. I met his daughter, who was 10 years old and loved drawing. Daniel met my brother and was surprised by how much his children had grown. The friendship did not return exactly as it had been at university. We were older, busier, and changed by different experiences. Still, the connection was real. We did not need to become the people we had once been. We only needed to learn who we were now. Meeting Daniel also caused me to think about other people I had lost touch with. Some relationships had ended for good reasons, but others had simply disappeared through silence. I began contacting a few old friends. Not every message led to a meeting, and some people had moved on. But several were happy to hear from me. I learned that people often remember us more warmly than we expect. They may also be waiting for someone else to make the first move. A year after the rainy day, Daniel and I returned to the same bookshop. The employee still remembered us as the two wet strangers who had recognized each other near the postcards. We bought another postcard, this time showing the city in heavy rain. Daniel kept one copy, and I kept the other. Mine now sits on the shelf near my desk. Whenever I see it, I remember how close we came to missing each other. If I had brought an umbrella, I might have continued to the station. If Daniel had entered another shop, we might have remained strangers for the rest of our lives. Instead, we both chose the same small place to wait for the rain. I used to think life-changing days needed to include major events. I imagined a new job, a long journey, or an important decision. That Friday seemed ordinary, until the weather changed. The heavy rain stopped me from continuing with my normal plans. It placed me in a quiet shop with enough time to look around, recognize someone, and remember the past. Most importantly, it gave me a second chance. Daniel and I had allowed ourselves to lose touch because we thought there would always be more time. Meeting again taught me not to wait too long when a relationship matters. People become busy, numbers change, messages are missed, years pass faster than we expect. But sometimes it is still possible to meet again. Sometimes a familiar face appears in an unexpected place. Sometimes the words "long time no see" carry more feeling than we can explain. Sometimes a friendship that seemed finished was only waiting for someone to open the door again. That rainy day changed my life because it returned a person I had never truly wanted to lose. Now, when heavy rain interrupts my plans, I do not always see it as a problem. I remember that day and wonder whether the delay may be leading me somewhere important. Sometimes we need to stop moving forward for a moment. We need to wait for the rain, look around, and notice who may be standing beside us.